Chapter 6. You deserve better. Then, why did they leave? If I deserved better, why did they leave me behind? We hear it so often. You deserve better. Like a soft mantra whispered into the cracks of our broken hearts. A phrase meant to comfort, to promise a brighter tomorrow, to help us believe in ourselves again. But in the quiet moments, when the world has gone silent, when the echo of their footsteps fades away, the question remains. If I deserved better, then why did they leave me? Why did they turn away from all the love I offered, all the hope I carried? It's a cruel irony. The very people who tell us we deserve better are sometimes the ones who refuse to stay. They promise forever, then disappear without a trace. They say they care, then walk away like a stranger in the night. We carry this contradiction in our chest, a heavy stone that sinks deeper with every "you deserve better" that rings hollow in empty rooms. Because it's easy to say we deserve more, it's harder to explain why the ones who left were supposed to be our better. How do you reconcile a heart full of love with hands that are suddenly empty? How do you hold on to your worth when the one who left was supposed to be your proof of it? Maybe they didn't leave because you weren't enough. Maybe their leaving says more about them than it ever will about you. Maybe their exit was their silence, an answer you never wanted to hear but needed to feel the truth of. Sometimes people leave not because you failed, but because they couldn't stay, because they were running from their own shadows, because they weren't ready to hold the weight of your soul. And that absence, that painful empty space, doesn't erase your value. It only reveals theirs. It's a bitter truth. The people who say you deserve better don't always practice it themselves, but that doesn't mean you stop believing in your worth. It means you start listening to the quiet voice inside that says, I am enough, even when they're gone. You deserve better, yes, but that better isn't always who you thought it was. Sometimes better is the space you create after the pain. Better is the time you give yourself to heal. Better is the love you learn to carry alone before anyone else arrives. You deserve better, not because someone left you, but because your soul is made for more than abandonment, than empty promises, than walking away. You deserve better, and the first person to give it to you is yourself. If you deserve better, then what does better look like? When it starts with you. Chapter 7. The Art of Looking Fine While Falling Apart. How much pain can a person hide behind a smile before they forget what joy ever felt like? We smile because it's easier than explaining why we're not okay. We laugh because silence would give away the storm quietly drowning us. We say, I'm fine, because the truth would make things awkward, uncomfortable, too real. So we master the art of pretending we slept well, pretending we're not lonely, pretending our hearts aren't held together with broken promises and invisible tape. Every morning we wake up and put on the same mask, the one that says, I'm strong, I've moved on, I'm okay. But beneath it, there's a tired soul screaming into a pillow no one hears. There's an ache that doesn't ask for attention, just a little understanding. It's funny how the ones who seem the happiest are often the ones hurting the most. Because we learn over time that sadness makes people uncomfortable. And weakness? That's a sin in a world that worships resilience. So we hide. Not because we want to, but because we feel like we have to. Because if you cry too much, you're called dramatic. If you're too quiet, you're called distant. If you speak your truth, you're called too sensitive. And slowly, without even realizing, you start editing yourself. You shrink your feelings. You laugh at your own pain. You perform happiness as if your survival depends on it. And maybe it does, because some of us don't know what would happen if we actually allowed ourselves to break. You get good at it, faking peace. You post quotes about healing while bleeding internally. You write captions about letting go while still checking if they viewed your story. You share stories about strength while quietly asking God why it still hurts. You become a magician of emotional illusion. You disappear the truth behind smiles and leave the audience applauding. No one sees the wires holding you up. No one knows you've been crying in bathroom stalls. That your pillow knows more about you than your best friend. That your strength isn't a gift, it's a costume. And maybe that's the most painful part. Not the heartbreak, not the loss, not even the loneliness, but the pretending. The performance of being okay when everything inside you is coming undone. The silent screaming, the smiling through panic attacks, the jokes made to distract from tears. There's a cost to all this pretending. You start losing sight of your real self, the one who felt deeply, the one who believed in love, the one who cried openly without shame. And in trying so hard to look fine, you forget how it feels to actually be fine. You forget that it's okay to fall apart. You forget that pain doesn't make you weak. It makes you real. You forget that crying isn't something to apologize for. It's something to honor. You don't have to keep acting. You don't have to be the strong one all the time. You don't have to smile just to make everyone else comfortable. You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to not be okay. You're allowed to collapse, even if no one is there to catch you. Because healing doesn't begin in public. It begins in that lonely, sacred space where you stop pretending, where you whisper, "I'm not okay," and allow the silence to hold you, where the tears finally fall not because you're weak, but because you've been strong for too long. One day, you'll learn to show your scars without dressing them up in laughter. One day, you'll stop hiding behind inspirational quotes and start writing your own truth. One day, you'll smile, not to convince the world you're fine, but because you actually are. And that will be the day you realize the most beautiful version of you is the one that doesn't perform, the one that breaks softly, openly, honestly, the one that says, "This is me, and even in this broken state, I deserve love." Because maybe being brave isn't about looking fine while falling apart. Maybe it's about falling apart in the open and letting the pieces be seen. So the real question is, if you stop pretending, who would you be underneath the mask? Chapter 8. It is what it is. A sentence that ended so many stories. Have you ever watched something break and then convinced yourself it was never whole to begin with? It is what it is. 5 words, so simple, so final. A quiet burial of emotions that once screamed for attention. We say it when we're tired of trying, when we run out of questions, when we no longer want to feel. It is what it is isn't acceptance. It's exhaustion in disguise. It's the anthem of the emotionally worn out. The lullaby we whisper to ourselves when hope feels like a betrayal. There was a time you wanted answers. You begged for explanations. You replayed conversations like forensic evidence, trying to make sense of the sudden silence. But all you got was the shrug of reality, The quiet exit of someone who once swore they'd stay. No apology, no closure, just, it is what it is. That sentence has ended more love stories than heartbreak ever could. It ends chapters that were still in the middle of their sentences. It silences people who only wanted to be heard. It turns beautiful beginnings into unresolved endings. And somehow, we convince ourselves to move on, not because we've healed, but because we're too tired to bleed again. You learn to live with unanswered questions. You stop checking your phone. You stop expecting closure. You stop needing justice. You teach your heart to stop being curious. Because in the end, you realize some people leave without caring how much they break you. Some stories fade without explanation. And some wounds never ask for bandages. They just learn to exist quietly. It is what it is. It sounds like peace, but it often tastes like surrender. It's what we say when we can't afford another breakdown, when we need to survive more than we need the truth. It's the shield we raise to protect ourselves from the chaos of clarity. Sometimes people leave, not because you were too much, but because they were too little. But they won't tell you that. They'll vanish and leave you with echoes and fragments. And when your friends ask, you'll just say, it is what it is. Because what else can you say when your soul is full of things you were never allowed to explain? This phrase has ended friendships that could have been saved with one honest conversation. It has closed doors that were only asking to be knocked on gently. It has shut down feelings that only wanted to be acknowledged, and we keep using it as if it's wisdom, as if detachment is a virtue, as if numbness is the same as strength. But what if we told the truth? What if, instead of saying, it is what it is, we said, I'm still hurting. I wish things were different. I don't understand why they stopped caring. I gave everything, and it still wasn't enough. What if we spoke the things we silence? What if we dared to keep the story open, even when the other person slammed the door shut? But we don't, because it's risky, because vulnerability isn't safe. So we choose the comfort of numbness over the chaos of feeling. We choose silence over honesty. We choose it is what it is over it still hurts. And maybe that's the saddest truth. Not that people leave, but that we stop fighting for what mattered because we're afraid of looking weak. We turn pain into poetry, tears into timelines, and sorrow into sarcasm. We hide the mess because clean endings are easier to explain. But healing doesn't live in phrases that numb. Healing lives in the trembling voice that says, I still miss them. In the honest heart that whispers, this still matters to me. Let the world call it weakness. Let them say you're too emotional, too sensitive, too intense. But don't let them convince you that closing your heart is the same as moving on. Because some stories deserve to be mourned fully, properly, tenderly, not just folded into a 5-word eulogy. You don't have to say, it is what it is. You can say, it shouldn't have been this way. I deserved better. This still breaks me sometimes. You're allowed to feel deeply, to want more, to ask why. Even if no answer comes, you can be strong and still admit that you didn't want the story to end like this. You can be healing and still cry when you hear their name. You can be moving forward and still look back with soft eyes. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. So the next time you feel like whispering, it is what it is, pause, breathe, ask yourself, is it really? Or is that just the silence you've learned to survive in? Final reflection. What if what it is was never the truth, but just what we say when we've given up on being understood? Chapter 9. We romanticize healing because reality is too lonely. If healing was a song, it wouldn't be a symphony. It would be a slow, broken hum at 3 a.m. with no one listening. We talk about healing as if it's poetry, as if it's some graceful rising sun after a long night of pain. We picture flowers blooming from scars, souls reborn from the ashes, and smiles that return stronger than before. But the truth? Healing is far from beautiful. It's messy, quiet, and painfully lonely. No one claps for you when you get out of bed after nights of crying. There are no trophies for choosing not to text them when your chest feels like it's caving in. There is no audience to witness the small wars you fight within yourself every single day, because real healing happens in silence, behind closed doors, with trembling hands and tired eyes. We romanticize healing because the reality of it is far too raw to hold. We turn it into quotes, pretty words, curated captions. We write, "And she rose like a phoenix." But we leave out the part where she almost didn't, where she begged the fire to consume her completely. We post, "Healing is a journey," but we don't say how long the road feels when you walk it all alone with bleeding feet. You see, healing isn't cinematic. It doesn't come with background music. It doesn't look like morning yoga or sipping tea with a peaceful smile. Sometimes healing looks like canceling plans because you couldn't fake energy. Sometimes it's staring at the ceiling for hours just to avoid thinking about them. Sometimes it's eating too much or not at all. Sometimes it's breaking down in the shower so no one hears you. And yet, we keep telling people to heal and move on as if it's a task on a to-do list, as if you can schedule closure, as if grief is linear. But healing doesn't follow order. It relapses. It regresses. You'll feel fine on Tuesday and shattered by Thursday without any warning. You'll think you've moved on until a song or a scent or a name brings it all back like it never left. No one tells you that healing feels like betrayal sometimes. You'll laugh one day and feel guilty. You'll forget their birthday and then hate yourself for it. You'll start to feel okay and wonder if that means they never really mattered. But they did. They do. And you're still allowed to carry love for someone who broke you. You're still allowed to cry even after months of trying to be strong. The world doesn't teach us how to sit with pain. It teaches us how to hide it, dress it up, filter it. But true healing begins when you stop pretending, when you let the sadness stay for tea, when you look it in the eye and say, "You can be here, but you don't own me anymore." Healing isn't about becoming the person you were before. It's about learning to live with the person you became after. It's about looking in the mirror and not recognizing the face, but loving it anyway. It's about planting seeds in the soil of sorrow and hoping something gentle might grow, not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. You might lose people during your healing. Not everyone is meant to sit through the slow parts. Some people will only stay for the transformation, not the transition. And that's okay, because you're not healing for them. You're healing for the version of you that cried herself to sleep, wondering if she'd ever feel whole again. There will be days when you miss who you were before the world hardened you. There will be days you ache for softness and wonder if you'll ever feel light again. But slowly, gracefully, you will. And it won't be a grand return. It'll be a soft unfolding. a gentle breath, a morning where the air doesn't feel so heavy, a night where you sleep without needing to forget, and someday, without even noticing it, you'll go a whole hour without thinking of them. You'll listen to that song again without flinching. You'll pass that place without swallowing pain. And you'll smile, not because you've forgotten, but because you survived remembering. Healing is not a sunrise. It's the slow melting of frost on a heart that forgot how to feel warm. So no, healing is not romantic. It is not beautiful. It is not easy, but it is real, and it is yours. Own it in all its silence, in all its loneliness, in all its slow, tender becoming. What if healing never looked magical? Because it was never meant to be watched, only survived. Chapter 10. Time heals. But some wounds age with you. Some wounds don't disappear. They just grow up with you, quieter, deeper, and more polite about how they hurt. Word count. Approximately 1,200 words. We've all heard it. Time heals everything. It's written in books, whispered in breakups, said like a promise, like a spell. But what if time doesn't heal? What if time just teaches you how to bleed more discreetly? What if the wounds don't close? They just stop screaming. They say the days will help, that the weeks will soften it, that the years will carry it away. But what they don't say is how some pain doesn't leave with the calendar. It just learns to wear better clothes. It becomes that quiet ache you carry into meetings, that sudden pause in the middle of a laugh, that silence right before you sleep. Time isn't always a healer. Sometimes it's just a painter. It colors your pain in new shades, gives it a new shape, a new name. But it doesn't erase it. You don't forget. You just learn how to remember without falling apart. Years can pass, and still, a street, a voice, a scent can pull you right back to the moment your heart broke. You'll feel your chest tighten like it did that day. You'll hear your breath catching your throat, just like it did when they walked away. And you'll realize the pain never left. It just got better at hiding. You grow around your wounds like trees do around fences and scars. You bloom with the damage still inside, not in spite of it, but because of it. But let's stop pretending that blooming means healing. Sometimes the flower still aches for the root it lost. They told you you'd be okay by now, and in many ways, you are. You've moved forward. You've built things. You've smiled, laughed, loved again. But sometimes you still hear your old pain knocking from behind closed doors. Softly, respectfully, as if to say, I haven't left. I've just grown quiet. And maybe that's what real grief is, not loud tears or shattered glasses, but the silent way your voice trembles when you speak of them, the way you pause before saying their name, the way your chest still forgets how to breathe when you see someone who looks like them in a crowd. Poetic, whisper. Some heartbreaks don't end. They just become part of your voice, your handwriting, your morning routine. Time teaches you how to carry it better. You learn how to smile with a heavy heart. You learn how to love again without comparing. You learn how to look happy without feeling guilty. But none of that means the wound has healed. It only means you've adjusted your steps around the ache. Sometimes we confuse coping with healing. Just because it doesn't destroy you anymore doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. You just built better walls, better distractions, better schedules. But at night, when everything is still, the ache still finds you. And then you remember, time didn't take it away. You just learned how to carry it without letting it ruin your day. You buried it under routines, under laughter, under new memories. But deep down, you still remember what it felt like to be left while still needing. You still remember how your voice cracked when you said, "I'll be fine," and meant none of it. You remember how it felt when the world moved on and you didn't. And that's the thing, you can forgive, you can understand, you can even wish them well. But some hurts age with you. They grow wrinkles. They learn silence. But they never leave. Final reflection, what if healing isn't forgetting, but simply remembering without breaking every time?